Been playing some Stellaris recently, and there's a really cool hangar in there on one of the loading screens that I've been trying to replicate, which is going on pretty well. One of the things that I wanted to do since I was building such a big ship is I wanted to try and take a crack at an airlock system. Try and make it better than the others, I suppose, which have a number of downsides. There's ones, some of the ones, including the scripting ones, have a vent in the middle that constantly depressurizes. I think this is a little bit of a kind of a bad technique because if the airlock is open to an interior space, then it will constantly be trying to depressurize that interior space, and the other vents will be constantly blowing out air to repressurize it, which I think is kind of stupid. And then there are other approaches like the official one in the Sparks of the Future DLC, where when the exterior door opens, just all the vents, all the air just vents straight out, which means that you lose oxygen. And so if you're on like a long voyage, you will eventually just run out of oxygen. Eventually quite quickly, but who knows. So this is the airlock in its default state. There's actually a system down here that determines if the hangar is pressurized or not. If the hangar is pressurized, then you don't need to go through an airlock to get into the main area. And so as a result, you can just walk all the way through and none of the airlock buttons do anything. That's controlled by that vent over there, which triggers this hangar bay was pressurized or hangar bay was depressurized block. It can trigger the depressurization block, and the airlock will go into the state that it would go into if the bay was depressurized, which is you can walk in from the outside and you trigger the airlock to become pressurized. When you hit the airlock pressurize button, doors close, then the vent either pressurizes or depressurizes, and then one of the doors opens depending on whether it was pressurized or depressurized. There's way more timer blocks here than necessary, but I wanted to break it down into something that you could understand. So there's ones for opening the doors, there's ones for closing the doors, turning on and off the buttons. One of the reasons for that is that it's actually more complicated than you would expect to do some of this stuff, like having it so that you can't just open the door and vent all the air into the outside is more complicated than you expect, because the only way you can lock the door is by shutting off the power to the door, which also prevents the door from being able to be mechanically opened or closed. And so there's a set of 3 blocks, one open, one close, and one shut off. And essentially when you probably see it, yeah, it runs a timer upon opening or closing the doors that turns the power back off. That does leave a little bit of a window in which time you can probably fuck with the doors if you want to, but kind of pointless. So when you hit a button, it shuts off all the buttons to prevent like multiple entry, which I've tested and it doesn't do anything crazy bad. There's a reason for that, because that robustness that I'll explain in a second. But it just seemed stupid that, you know, you could hit it 3 times and then, you know, you would end up in the same state. The actual which door is opened is actually not like a lot of other airlocks based on a set of timers that, I don't know, wait for the air to be pulled in or pushed out of the room. In fact, the air vent is completely off when you step into the room. What happens is that when you press the button, it turns the air vent on and toggles whether it's pressurizing or depressurizing. The room ceiling and it turning on causes the sensor in it to activate. It's actually got actions within it. I don't know whether it's just the room ceiling or whether it's just turning it on. I imagine that just turning on and off causes it to do this check as to whether the room's pressurized or not. But yeah, so the doors are actually open or closed literally based on the actual pressure in this room, rather than in an event sequence. That does have a downside, which is that I've stuck a number of oxygen tanks around the back here, and if your oxygen tanks become full, which can happen if you keep using it, then you simply cannot depressurize the room anymore. And as a result, you just get stuck like this, see? And neither door will open or close. This is a little bit of a frustration, and I think it's honestly kind of a bit of a shortfall in the game's code. What I've considered doing is making another room that's exactly the same size and pumping the air into there instead of just pumping it into the main oxygen system. But it's difficult to really say what the correct solution to this is, because I don't think there is an easy way to vent air to the outside other than filling up a room full of air, then opening the door, because the air vents actually shut off as soon as the room is no longer sealed. Anyway, there we go. That's my slightly over-engineered but still a pretty interesting airlock system.